Okay, welcome back, guys. So let's get right into it. This is like our main skin reference in here, but at the same time, I also have another reference in here for a more realistic human character. So I'm going to be using this as my reference guide to kind of get the more or less like see like the albedo texture of this, and then use the albedo texture and texture this our character in here. So this is albedo texture with no light information in there. So this is what I'm going to be using as my base to kind of capture the essence of the colors in there, but still keeping this in mind as a final pass for this. So let's jump right in. Okay. So the idea is to kind of start with a dark shade and then build up lighter shade on top of that. So let's select the girl matte, isolate this, and I'll go over to my texture set this to 4K resolution. So that should give us a more defined wrinkle detail and skin pore detail around this. So it should be a bit clearer now, like so should be fine. Okay, so now let's carry on. So I'm gonna go in to my layers. I'll delete this. Originally, if I'm working on a Caucasian skin, first thing I usually do is kind of drop in a vein blur splatter smart material I created in here. So but let me show you guys actually so you can actually see that. So I'll just type case in here. Okay, smart materials. Let's see. Yeah, this is the one. So red skin. Typically, I start with a base like this, kind of capture the redness of the skin, and then then I flood that with some brighter Caucasian skin tone in there. But this is a dark skin tone, so a darker skin tone does not necessarily need this in here. Actually, you can always start with a dark tone and then just fill that up. Except if just for the sake of having this in there, just to have like another additional layer underneath this, we can keep this, but take down the redness down some more, and then create a fill layer that should be on top of this, and this fill layer should have a more rougher value somewhere around, not entirely rough though, but somewhere around this should be fine. Then we're going to unpick a darker shade. You can pick from any of these two though. You can also see some darker shade in here, some more darker reddish tone. So maybe we should pick from this instead. Yeah, let's find this dark tone. Yes, this is a good base. So I'm going to be using, maybe I should even drag and drop this in here. So you can we just work with just one. Select this two. So work with just one pure ref in here, pure ref board in here. So let me paste this in here like so. Let's try and create, yeah, we can create a bit more space by moving this out. We putting this down here instead. Then bring this two in here and just scale this out a little bit more. So I have those two in here, so we can actually pick in between them. Then this I can temporarily hide. Okay, so working with one now. Let's close this. You can see how using this now, it kind of completely covers that red tone. So if you go in and then let's increase this all the way up again. So there isn't so much difference in there actually. Except we can break things up some more. We can add a black marks. Let's rename this to base dark tone. Alright. This is gonna be our base dark tone for this. Let's go back in here. think this is gonna be like more or less like the main reference to paint with. Let's see. Yeah, something like so. We're still going to lighten things up when we need to lighten things up though. But for now, this should be fine. Hmm, okay. So I'm gonna right click on this, add the black marks. On that black mask, I'm gonna add a fill layer. And on that fill layer, I'm going to add a use a texture map in here. It kind of marks this. So let's use the cloud. Let's use the cloud in here. So let's find a good cloud texture in here. No, it's supposed to be like some cloud texture in here. Yes, clouds. So there are a few ones in here. Let's start with this. Okay. Then I'll use it on the keyboard to go to the marks. Let's find the marks for that. So this is the marks for this. Let's tile this some more. Make sure we're using this on triplanar mapping. Let's tile this some more. Now it looks to it's looking to more or less like some non-seamless tileable map in here. So we want to kind of make sure we're not seeing like any repetition in there too much. We don't want too much repetition in there. Open up the noise parameters. Adjust this a bit more. Hit M on the keyboard. Let's see what we have. Okay. Maybe tune down the tiling to get this spread out a bit more. I'll come in there. Let's add a blur to this. I'm on add filter. Under this filter, let's use the blur filter in here. Increase this a little bit more. Okay. And I'm going to duplicate this. For this one underneath this, I think I would. Let's start by turning off the blur. Let's randomize this. Let's see what we get. Just basically to kind of fill this up some more. Let's take down the cloud. Like so should be fine. Okay. Then this at the top, I'm going to lighten this a bit more. Yeah, like so should be fine. Okay. I'm getting something in here though. So I'm going to take this down some more, or maybe probably duplicate this instead. And I'm going to clear or remove the marks in here. Remove the marks. Let's do a slightly differentiate in here. Slightly differentiate in here, something like so. And I'm going to take down the visibility of that somewhere around here. So this is just going to help us break up the surface a bit more. So if you see on the keyboard, let's see base color. You can see how this is kind of broken up some more. You can see some patches of breakup in there, which is precisely what we need. Some redness also too in a few places. I'm gonna select this my base tone and then take that. Let's see what we get. Okay, take this down slightly. All right, so we can continue on. Now, based on the main reference we have, we're not going to go overboard in here. Just enough to kind of create this skin texture, skin tone texture in here will be just fine. Okay. So now that we have this in here, I think I would need to duplicate this again, then get one just below this red tone in here, and most likely darken this even more, like so. Yeah, like so should be fine. Okay. Then we're still gonna go in and then start breaking this up by using some by adding some paints in there, more or less like doing some hand painting in there. But so far, this should be working just fine. You can see some breakups in there, which is fine. Okay, let's compare this to our main reference again. Yeah, I think the skin tone is kind of more or less close to what we need it to be. So we just need some breakup here and there. Okay, so I think we need to do some better naming in here. Let's just base dark tone, or maybe darker instead. Let's use darker instead. Okay, let's rename this to base. Okay, base dark. I've done the first one to darker, then this should be uh let's see. What can we name this as? I'm not good with naming though, so don't mind me if I create or use weird naming conventions in here, but this should be fine. So base like dark. mm, base um dark. No, let's use lights instead. Okay, then I'm going to create or rather duplicate this. I'm going to name this to mm, light brown tone instead. So let's rename this. So remove this base, light brown. All right, light brown. Then I think we can remove this base we have in here and put brown in front. All right. Um, name this so. Okay, brown tone. All right, just to keep things organized. That's some kind of naming things in here, just to keep things a bit more organized. Okay, yeah. One more thing I would like to do also in here would be, I think I should have done this first, was to change our lights scene to Tomako Studio instead. Tomako Studio has a better neutral light setup for this. So, because I need a more neutral light setup. The previous one we had has a more orangish tint to it, which is not precisely what I want. So, in that case, that means we need to kind of darken some of this a bit more. Let me turn this off for now. I think this base tone, I think I would, let's start with this first. Let's darken it some more. Okay, select this, darken this a little bit more. Let's see if we go all the way black. Let's see if there's any major difference. Okay, there's some differences there. Okay, let's do this also too. Let's darken this a little bit more. Okay, now it's just way too dark. Kind of creating some weird shape in here also too. So let's check this. Let's see what all of this does in here. Let's see, we darken this. Let's see what we get. Okay, maybe too dark. That feels way too dark. I think somewhere around the nature of around where it was before should be fine. All right, move our light around. Let's see. Okay, now I'm seeing some weird issue for the lip, and this has to do with the normal map in here. So this issue is from the normal map, so we can easily fix that. So we can just go to the normal map a bit for this. Go to normal map. Let's drag this into Photoshop. Come on now. Okay, so let's drag this in here to Photoshop. It's a new document in here. Clear this. Let's zoom into the lip. Let's find the lip in here. So This is where our issue is coming from. So we can use the clone stamping in here and then just fix that. Okay, hold alt, grab this part and just use it to clean this up. Grab this part, use this to clean this up. Grab this part again, clean this up. Just tap in there to clean that. Grab this, let's clean this up. All right, so I'm going to Control Shift S to save this. Save this. Let's rename this to 2. Save this. Okay. Then I'll go back to Substance Painter and then import that back in. So it's almost done saving. It's almost done saving. So it's saved now. Let's drag this in here. Did I think I'm on the wrong place? Let's go over here. So let me even make sure I'm even using the correct material. Okay, that girl normal, that's the correct one. Okay, so I'm going to go over and then bring this back to Substance Painter, drag and drop this in here. Let's use textures, import. Okay, so let's go over to the normal map, remove this normal map, then drag a new normal map in there. Okay, yeah, much better. This will work just fine now. So not so much happening in there, but I think there's a darkness in there that we need to remove, probably coming from the ambient occlusion, I believe. Yes, so we need to kind of bake a new ambient occlusion for just the head alone. So select the head, turn off everything else apart from the ambient occlusion. Okay, let's bake curvature map also too. I think we need new curvature map for this. So curvature map to be generated from the normal map. Right, so yes, this should be fine. Then we can run this again. Bake selected. It shouldn't take time because we're only baking for 2 in here. Only baking for 2. Yeah, that's done. So return back to painting mode. Yeah, this should be fine now. Okay. Yes, we can definitely work with this. So we're going to set this or kind of leave this as our base texture in here. This is our base texture. So in the next lesson, we're going to work on, let me even rename all of this down here. Put all of this in a group. And I'm going to rename this to base tone. Base dark skin tone. All right. I can even save this as a smart marks also too. So let me just really put case in front. Let me show you guys how to save at a smart material, so you can always reuse this later on for other project just to get a base to start with. So I'm going to right click in here and I'm going to use save, or rather create smart material in here. So I've done that. Now you can see this in here. So I'm doing this because all of what we did in here is just using procedural textures, kind of creates a base texture for the character before we start adding layers of painted textures or coloring in here to kind of break up the uniformity of this a bit more. So that's that. So I'll see you guys in the next lesson. Bye for now.